Hello, good evening, everyone. So sorry, we have a little change of schedule. Let me introduce myself. I'm Matteo Renzi. I'm the former Prime Minister of Italy, but I'm a proud member of FII Institute, a Future Investment Initiative with Richard here. And in this role, I'm so proud to welcome here a great friend of Saudi, a great friend of Middle East, and a great friend also of mine, Jared Kushner. And that is a great pleasure to be with Jared here. But I'm Italian, and you know, Italian guys have a lot of export. Fashion, food, also great technology, healthcare industry. And now we have a new asset of export. We export instability. UK try to be as Italy, but they have 44 days of government, a great result. Italians do it better because we changed more or less a government every year. And so we will see what could happen. I start from that because the idea with Jared is discuss about the crisis around the world, particularly in politics, but not only in politics. And starting about that means, look what happened in the map. This morning we listened a lot of great discussions. We listened about economy, finance, population, demography, poverty. Please look just 1 minute what happened today in the geopolitical map. I started from UK just to joke against our British guys and British friends, but we have a problem in all European countries. We have a problem from Japan. I was just 3 weeks ago in the ceremony for remember Abe Shinzo, former prime minister, killed in a terrible way some months ago. From Japan to Southeast. Of course, we have a lot of tensions for war. We have a great problem of demography in Europe, not only of democracy. And my idea, our idea, is try to discuss how that situation of global tensions around the world could give a new chance to this place. And for that, I pay tribute to Jared for a very great job in the construction of Peace of Abraham. I think is one of the pillars, not only of administration, White House administration, which Jared served, but also for Western countries for the next decades. This is my personal view. What do you think, Jared, about in this map of crisis? From Japan to South America, next Sunday, very important election in Brazil. From tensions in the war, of course, from Ukraine and Russia, and what could happen in the next months in China with Taiwan and the Chinese Sea. What do you think, what type of role you imagine for this part of the world?
Good. Well, thank you very much for such a gracious introduction. And Prime Minister has been a great friend of mine over the years, and as I was getting into government, you helped me really understand a lot of the different dynamics in Europe and the region, and so I was very grateful for your friendship, and I still am, and so I wanted to thank you. I also want to take a moment to thank our organizer. I'd like to thank the Crown Prince for hosting this amazing summit, and His Excellency Yasser as well, and Richard Attias and his wife Celia for all you do to make this happen. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you guys. So. It's a lot of questions you asked, but I will say that the Middle East has gone from a place over the last 5 years where it was a hotbed of global instability, a place where countries all over that you mentioned were fearing that terrorism was being exported from, and a place where a lot of countries were spending a lot of military budget trying to figure out how to bring some stability. You had a civil war in Syria where 500,000 people, civilians, were killed. Iran was loaded with, on pathway to a nuclear weapon with a lot of funding that they were now paying to all the different terror groups. You had Libya was destabilized, you had Yemen was destabilized, and most frightening, ISIS had a caliphate the size of Ohio where they were beheading Christians and killing journalists and doing all kinds of terrible things. When President Trump came into office, we started looking at things differently and not focusing on the past. We focused on what the future could bring and how do we find common interests between people. And so the Abraham Accords peace that was made in 2020 has unleashed a lot of connectivity in a region that has so many amazing resources, not just, we think about natural resources like gas and oil, but also human talent. And you see this region now where Israel, which is a startup nation, and the UAE, which is a startup nation, and even Saudi Arabia, which is a startup nation, are starting to think about their future generations, their youth. They have plans as countries. They have a lot of strength. They have a lot of innovation. And I do think that you're going to see over the next decade a lot of progress and growth coming from this part of the world as a lot of people in different countries are dealing with their own instabilities in different ways. So I've been quite positive on it for a while. And I would say the biggest lesson in a pretty frightening global set of problems that we face today is that when we were pursuing the Abraham Accords for years, whether you'd go on social media or you'd read, the experts, they would say something was impossible and it couldn't be done, and it was destined for conflict and destined for non-breakthrough. And we achieved something that nobody thought could occur because we were optimistic and creative and determined. And the significance of what that breakthrough was is being felt every day. I think it's been more and more recognized in the West, where maybe because of COVID and politics, it was a little bit more ignored than it's been felt in this region. But seeing the fundamental coming together of the Jewish people and the Muslim faith, and now having that out in the open, and the exchange of business opportunities, the exchange of cultural experiences, is something that's bringing us all back to the root of our humanity and helping us find a foundational place to realize that we have a lot more reasons to agree with each other and work with each other than we do to fight with each other, as we're seeing is so prevalent in so many ways. But I do find that, if you go below the politics, and now that I'm outside of the political sphere, I have a lot more time to watch it with a lot, less at stake for me personally than I had when I was serving in government. You see that a lot of people are trying so hard to say the right things, and I think very often not working hard enough to do the right things or get to the right outcomes. And so doing big things is hard, bringing big change is hard, but I think you have a very good set of leadership, especially in this region now, that has very good goals for what they're trying to achieve. They're goals that lift humanity, lift the world, will lift their populations, will invest in the most precious natural resource, which is the youth and the people in different countries. And I'm quite optimistic about what's capable, what's possible with the proper leadership and the proper execution.
That is very interesting. And when we decided with FII the name in investing in humanity, we think exactly about what needs today the world, and particularly political world. We live in a time with big challenges and very, very interesting. Please, thinking about new technologies, robotics, artificial intelligence, don't make a mistake. Artificial intelligence is not the natural stupidity of a lot of politics. This is a different thing. Artificial intelligence, big data, we have a great challenges. But investing in humanity means come back to be leader and not only follower. This is a problem today for a lot of organizations. Particularly, I think, for the role of social media, we risk to become everyone focused on day by day, or we don't think about next generation. We think about next post we have to publish on Instagram, next tweet we have to do. And that risks to create a generation without a deep vision. For that, I think the decision to invest in the Peace of Abraham was one of the most important decisions because it gave the sense of generation investment. I have this question for you. Really, the events of the last months show a radical change also in the defense and military policies. Thinking about what happened, of course, between Russia and the Ukraine, but thinking about old interview, the president of France, I think President Macron is one of the most brilliant guys and leaders today on the stage in Europe. And 3 years ago, Macron used this expression to describe NATO. He used to say, NATO is in brain death. Paradoxically, Putin's invasion gave a new life to NATO. It's a very paradox because Putin gave new life to NATO. Is very strange. But do you think the peace of Abraham will have in the next years, then we have to understand when, a next step in the military and defense and security, next step between the countries who signed that? You think there is here the necessity of a NATO of Middle East, a different NATO, of course?
Yeah, so I think that NATO, we can learn a lot from where it was positive and where it's lacking. And I think that in the world that we're living in today, there's a lot of reason to try to reach to find things that are more bespoke for what they need to be. And I think that a lot of these international institutions often become rudderless with time. And I think earlier today they were, I think, quoting Confucius. The version I knew was from Alice in Wonderland, where the Cheshire Cat says, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which path you take. And I think that being exposed to politics, you see that a lot of people are pontificating on what they think will happen. And it's virtually impossible to predict what will be, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, because so much of it is determined on the decisions of fallible people throughout the world, right? You were a leader of a country, you recognize that there's always going to be competing factions in every country, and sometimes leaders get it wrong, and sometimes they get it right. And I think that that is the type of thing that you don't see enough of today, where people are focused on what's the long-term vision and plan for what we're creating. So an example is Brexit. I was in favor of Brexit. I think that the European Union has a lot of problems to it that Britain could have dealt with very properly. But if you come out of it and you don't have a plan to execute to then deal with the vulnerabilities that are created, then where does that leave you? And I think that you have that case all over. So for this region, in terms of a NATO comparable, this is an idea that we outlined and started working on, where the big vision that we were trying to achieve with the Abraham Accords was that if you can get regional stability from Haifa to Muscat, you can fill it in with a security architecture, you can create economic interconnectivity between everyone, and you show the next generation that they have unlimited opportunity by investing, instead of taking all the money that's been spent on military over the previous 2 generations, and you put it into, instead of bullets, you put it into bridges. You can invest in your society and education and create opportunity that will make this place, I think, absolutely incredible. You look at what China did over 20 years by making a lot of very smart investments in their society, in their infrastructure, in their country, and they created an economic juggernaut. The same is very possible here. It has all the right ingredients. It just needs to be put together. But I still think the 2 fundamental responsibilities of a leader is, number 1, to provide safety for your people and quality of life. And number 2 is to give them the opportunity to achieve their potential through whatever means possible. And so I think that that's an architecture that has the ability to work. We see over the last 70 years how Europe has really thrived through peacefulness. Again, there's a lot of complaints we could have about the EU structure or about NATO, and obviously we have the current circumstance, which is very, very unfortunate. But if you go in the post-World War II era, after a time of conflict, the security architecture allowed people to put their efforts towards the positivity. And I think that when mankind is rowing together with the right goals, with the right purpose, the potential is unlimited.
That is very interesting. I think everyone who visited Riyadh some years ago understand now how is deep the change in this country. Very exciting processes of transformation and radical change. And that is very important for the goals of Vision 2030 launched by Crown Prince, but also for the great energy we touched in every visit in that city, in that country, from Alula to Jeddah, in every single project. That is interesting. But we have, in the same discussion, to check with a different style around the world, because China helped 800 million people to exit from poverty in the last years. A lot of countries in the Southeast grow very, very strongly. We have a great possibility with Africa, and today Macky Sall, the president of Senegal, and also the president of African Confederation, spoke in a very interesting intervention. We can discuss about everything, but we have two problems. The first is Europe. The second is United States. Last question. Of course, I believe in Europe. I believed a lot in Europe, and I continue to believe. I have different ideas about Brexit. I think Brexit was a mistake. I think you will see in the next years probably someone in UK will try to come back. Also because Scotland referendum could create a great chaos. But I cannot discuss now about Europe. I'm a dreamer, and I hope my son will see the United States of Europe. This is my personal dream. Probably I'm alone, but I believe in that. We are two. Thank you so much, you and me. But you are not Europe. Yeah, it's good. Thank you. It's important. I cannot open a referendum because last time I lost a referendum, I lost my job. So I hate a referendum. Please don't call a referendum. If you need that, I can introduce David Cameron. He thinks exactly as myself. Just to conclude, EU is a great continent and is a great problem today because we haven't this energy we touch everywhere around the world. But we have also a stronger pillar, the alliance with the United States, and today, from the other side of the ocean, we see an America very divided states of America, polarized states of America. What do you think, independently from midterm, next election, of course, now Jared is a businessman, is not a politician for the moment. Then we will see, I don't know. But what do you expect from the next 10 years to reduce the polarization of United States and, as Jimmy Dimon explained very well, in my view, this morning in the speech, to have America as a leader, again, leader of the world?
So I think these are very big topics all, but I think the most important thing is creating purposefulness for where you want to go. I think that, I saw in politics when people are always looking to the right or to the left, the best direction is always to move forward. And if you think about the fundamental differences between Europe and the US has a lot of big advantages. The biggest advantage the US has is two things called the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, right? So you have great geological boundaries, you have tons of natural resources, you have pretty good neighbors in terms of Canada and Mexico, I think pretty exceptional neighbors economically, and so you have a lot of security built in, and you have a stronger federal system than you have in Europe. So that provides a lot of what I would say is the fundamental tools to achieve what I think is going to be a tremendous potential if executed correctly. I think if you think about this part of the world, what's happened, the leadership has come up with things like Vision 2030. I met Richard when we were doing the Peace to Prosperity Summit in Bahrain, which was highlighting a different way to think about the traditional Arab-Israeli conflict of saying, instead of thinking about who wronged who, 70 years ago, let's think about what our children can gain by being together in the future. But here you've had big economic visions like Vision 2030, and to prepare what we did for that conference, we studied every economy over the last, since World War II, whether it's Japan's rebuilding, Poland's rebuilding, we went through China, what they did, South Korea, we went through Ukraine, why that didn't work. And we studied a lot of the different models of governance and industrial policy that led to different successes and failures. So I think having a vision and goals to aim towards is very important. I think in America, there's still a lot of things that people agree on, right? I think that we have the strongest private sector in the world, I believe, and I think that we have the strongest military in the world. I do believe that if we can put the right framework together and make people realize, and again, we have a lot of influences today that are causing people to be more at their throats than need to be. But through my experience in government, I found that we were able to bring big bipartisan victories, whether it was working on criminal justice and prison reform, something that was very partisan, but we ended up getting 87 votes. We did a trade deal with Mexico and Canada, which was very controversial. For a year and a half, everyone was saying, trade is zero sum. They were saying it would never happen. They were criticizing everything we did. They never liked this proposal. But ultimately, it passed the Senate with over 80 votes as well. So big bipartisanship is possible. It's just not what's exciting to cover in the media, so it doesn't get as much airtime relative to the petty squabbles. But I think if the leaders ignore a lot of the noise that we spoke about before and focus on what are these issues, what are the objectives, what are the tactical plans, and come together, there's a lot of good that can be done. So I've seen it happen in the US. I think that there's a lot of people who are rooting for bipartisanship. There's a lot of people who are rooting for people to come together to succeed. And there's a lot of people around the world who are rooting for strong American leadership to play a role in helping bring more peace and stability in a way that I saw firsthand very actively we were able to do in our time. So I think it's very possible. You have a lot of incredible leaders in the House and in the Senate who want to see this. And again, maybe the best gift my mother gave me was optimism. So I'm always optimistic that positive outcomes can be achieved. And it's a very worthy goal to put the effort and sometimes the pain to pursue them.
There is no good wind for the Navy who don't know the map. That was the quote used this morning from Yassir Miami. Is a Roman quote because he's a Seneca. He's a good philosopher, great man from ancient Rome. With these words, I give a special thanks to Jared to stay with us, and thank you so much to everyone for this interesting event.
Thank you. Thank you.